The moment your character first appears in your script, you should already be telling a story about them. You're telling the reader who they are, what they want, what their problem is, what journey they're about to go on. I'm going to share some examples of character intros from some great film and TV scripts so you can see how this is done. And I'm also going to analyze them so that we can see what kind of lessons are to be learned that you can use in your own scripts. At the end, I'll sum up all the lessons, so you can just skip to that if you just want the bullet points. Fair warning, I will be talking about the stories of some of these examples, so, there will be some spoilers, but none of these are super new. All right, we're going to start with Jordan Peele's script for Get Out to learn the basics of formatting and style. So this is where we meet both Chris and Rose early in the movie. Interior, Brooklyn loft, bathroom, morning. Chris Washington, 26, a handsome African-American man, shuts the medicine cabinet. He's shirtless and naturally athletic. He scrutinizes his reflection with a touch of vanity. And then interior, Starbucks counter, morning. Rose Armitage, 28, Caucasian, brunette with freckles, cool and beautiful like an old summer camp crush. Rose looks at pastries through the glass. She can't help but smile. So the first thing we can see here is how the names are written. Both Chris Washington and Rose Armitage are in all caps. And this is what you do when a character is first introduced in the script. So after their name, we get their ages. Chris is 26, Rose is 28. These are specific ages, and you'll see that in scripts, but sometimes you'll also see a more general range, like it could say late teens, early 20s, mid 30s, elderly, something like that. All right, next up we get their gender. Chris is specifically mentioned as a man. We also have the pronouns he, and his. So it's very clear that he's a man. With Rose, it never actually says, female or woman or anything like that. But we know that she's a female because of the pronoun she. And you're also dealing with the reader's expectations. If the reader sees Rose as a name, they're going to expect it to be a female, so you don't have to necessarily highlight it again by saying female or woman or something like that. However, you could have a male character named Rose if you wanted. In that case, you just want to be a little more upfront about it. You'd say Rose Armitage, 28, male. He does this, etc. Anytime you're going against the reader's expectations, just make it very clear. You just don't want them to be like, wait, what? Or have to go back and read it a couple times. It takes them out of the flow. We also get the ethnicity of the characters. Chris is a African-American man and Rose is a Caucasian. You don't always have to mention the ethnicity of the character. You can do it when you think it's important or when you feel it's relevant to the story. I want to highlight something about the physical description of these characters. They're not just being described for description's sake, not just for the picture in the reader's minds. They're actually already helping to set up the story. So Chris is described as handsome and naturally athletic. His body is basically being shown as desirable here, which sets up this entire story of people literally desiring his body. So we see that this is sort of a physical specimen that people are going to look at later in the movie and be like, I like this physical specimen. I would like to have that body. And then for Rose, we get that she's attractive, but also she's sweet. And this kind of sets up her story as well, because we get how she is alluring to the victims of her family, but also she's very non-threatening. So since she's basically bait in this story, it's sort of setting up why she's such good bait. This is important because I think oftentimes people don't necessarily put too much thought in the physical description in their scripts. They're just saying they're this, they're that, or whatever. But why are you sharing those specific details? What do those specific details have to do with the characters and their story and the story you're trying to tell? I should also note that this level of detail is only because they're main characters, right? Chris is the hero, Rose is the female lead. We're getting a lot of detail about them. You don't do this with your minor characters. Sometimes you might not get any physical description at all. If it's just a waiter at a bar that just drops off food and maybe says one thing and leaves, they don't really need any description. Minor characters don't even necessarily need names. They could just be cop or waiter or group of fans or fan 1, fan 2, something like that. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a like, lovingly tap that subscribe button, and turn on notifications for more helpful screenwriting content like this. Next, let's look at the introduction of Mark Zuckerberg in Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network. We actually start over black and hear some dialogue from Mark as he's talking to his girlfriend at the time, Erica. And then we have interior campus bar night. Mark Zuckerberg is a sweet-looking 19-year-old whose lack of any physically intimidating attributes masks a very complicated and dangerous anger. He has trouble making eye contact, and sometimes it's hard to tell if he's talking to you or to himself. So this is a different style, right? Aaron Sorkin is a little more florid or maximalist. He's sharing some internal things, interestingly enough. So with the Jordan Peele, with the Get Out example, it was kind of more, everything was physical. It was very base. But here we're actually learning about like Mark Zuckerberg's personality, his complicated and dangerous anger. It's things that are not just on the surface. It's also interesting to note that for Aaron Sorkin, dialogue is super important, right? He's known for the rhythm of his dialogue. And in this example, we actually hear Mark in the script before we see him. So we're getting to know him through his dialogue, which is also part of the introduction of the character, what he's saying, not just the description of him in the script. Let's take a deeper look at what Sorkin is doing here. So it says Mark is a sweet-looking 19-year-old whose lack of any physically intimidating attributes masks a very complicated and dangerous anger. So one thing that's interesting is that he's being described almost as what he's not, right? He's not physically intimidating. He is sweet-looking. But what's interesting here is that Sorkin is using this physicality or lack of physicality to try to describe something deeper about the character, that he has this complicated and dangerous anger. There's a school of thought that this is wrong, right? That you shouldn't describe something internal in a screenplay because it should only be things that can be seen or heard. That's the whole show don't tell debate, right? You should only show things. You shouldn't tell about a character. You should just show them. And show don't tell, like a lot of things, is one of the things where it's like 80% true, but like it's not 100% true. But it's not just telling here. It's using the physicality to describe something beneath. There's a tension there. And that's kind of what makes this work, is that there's a tension between what he looks like and what's underneath. It's something that the reader can feel. It's something that the audience will be able to see. And I think it's something that the actor can really play. They can play that tension inside them of how they look versus, how they feel. It also says he has trouble making eye contact, and sometimes it's hard to tell if he's talking to you or to himself. I love this because you can picture the eyes like darting back and forth. It's very vivid in the brain. And again, it's also using a physical thing to show something underneath. And that's, the challenge of screenwriting is often to externalize the internal, to show on a screen what's happening inside of a character. And this eye thing is a great way of doing that. And also this whole, it's hard to tell if he's talking to you or to himself, puts you at a sense of unease. Like you are uncertain. You don't know what's going on. So again, there's tension here. That's really good. So all of this is actually giving more vibe than details. And I think this is really important when you're doing your character intros. The actual physical characteristics are less important than the vibe of the character. What do you want the reader to take away about this character? Because the reader can't store that much information about them, especially when they're just meeting them. So like, what do you want to highlight? So Sorkin here is highlighting this tension, the contrast between what he looks like and what's inside of him. And it's also setting up the problem of this character, that he has this anger inside of him that's driving people away, which kind of happens as this scene goes on. So we're setting up basically the problem of the whole movie just from this description. All right, now I want to look at the script for Greta Gerwig's Little Women, where we meet Jo March, our heroine, as it says, and this is again a very different style. Interior, New York, publishing office, 1868. I want to interrupt for a second, actually, just to note that the scene heading is a different style, using periods instead of dashes. So New York period publishing office period instead of New York dash publishing office, which is what you'll usually see. It also mentions the date, which is something you're told not to do, but it's actually very helpful in period pieces and in movies with multiple timelines, which this is both. I did a whole video on scene headings that I'll link to if you want to check it out. All right, back to the script. Jo March, our heroine, hesitates. In the half-light of a dim hallway, she exhales and prepares, her head bowed like a boxer about to go into the ring. She puts her hand on the doorknob, a pause, and then she opens it onto a disorderly room. It is full of men. Some sit with their feet up on the desks, higher than their hats, which they do not remove for her. They smoke and read, hardly noticing that she has walked in. Jo walks through the desks, looking for one in particular. Excuse me. Mr. Dashwood, the oldest, smokiest gentleman, looks at her. I was looking for the weekly volcano office. I wish to see Mr. Dashwood. Mr. Dashwood stares silently. Jo, nervous, presenting pages. A friend of mine desired me to offer a story by her. She wrote it. She'd be glad to write more if this suits. I love this scene. It's so different. For one, there's no age mentioned. There's no description of Jo March mentioned. It's very different. All we're seeing is her in action, and it's setting her up right away in conflict. She hesitates. She's nervous. We see this. And then she goes into this room like a boxer she's doing battle here, right? And then it's just this room full of men who are rude to her. They don't take off their hats or get up or anything. She's nervous. She lies, by the way. She says her friend wrote this story when really she wrote it. So we're just getting a very clear view of her character through her actions, which is a fantastic thing that you can do in your scripts, is that show who your character is through their actions. Give them a problem to solve and show how they deal with that problem. And that will reveal so much about their character. So in this scene, she's trying to sell the story and she's doing it very meekly. And the negotiation that follows, she just like takes the first offer. She doesn't push back or ask for more money or anything like that. It's just like very kind of meek and like, yes, sir, thank you very much. I'll take whatever I can get. So Greta Gerwig is using the actions of the character to give a very clear view of who she is. And also, this is starting our character on her journey, because this opening scene is a mirror of the ending of the movie, where she goes in to sell her book. And in the end, she's like negotiating over what percentage she gets and all this stuff. And she's like very firm, and you see that she's grown. So the character introduction is starting her journey, starting her story that will go to the end of the movie. So that's something you can do in your scripts, is start them on their journey, show where they are now, which kind of lets the audience know a little bit like where they're going to go. Let's leave the world of movies for a moment and look at a TV example. This is the pilot script for Christopher Storer's The Bear. And again, this is a very different style, a very different approach to a character intro. A cage directly in the middle of Orleans Street. Something trapped, locked away. A creature whimpers, cries from inside. It moves only in a square. Brown fur sweeps between metal bars. Body too big for the cell. Silent between wines. Steel slivers of Chicago in the distant night. Nobody around until Carmi, the bear Berzado, 25 years old, strung out, apron around his waist, slowly approaches the cage. Shh, shh, it's okay. The cage begins to rock back and forth with the creature's weight. Carmi nervously, slowly undoes the latch, opens the cage door and quickly backs up. Then, after a moment, come on, go. The creature emerges, a mass of dirty, matted hair. 4 stout legs stretch, grime and gore affixed to sharp claws, mouth bleeding and ill. Dog, coyote, whatever it is stands, shivers. Carmi bends to the ground, stares at the creature. Silence. Then the creature moves, walking only in a square. It's okay. It's okay. The creature stops, looks at Carmi, reveals sad, abused eyes. There was a cute animal in there once. Carmi nods. I know. Carmi reaches to pet it. Fangs jut from the creature's mouth, grows into a nightmarish monster, lunges at Carmi just as he wakes up violently, panting. Sits up where in interior the beef/kitchen morning. The kitchen. He fell asleep on the prep table, surrounded by steel, stoves, ovens, pots, pans, etc. So again, this is a very different approach because we're actually meeting the character in a dream, which is a risk and hard to pull off, but I think is pulled off really well here. I mentioned earlier that the enduring challenge of screenwriting is to externalize the internal, right? You're trying to convey through a screen and through the sound that the audience hears what is happening inside of our characters, right? What they're thinking, what they're feeling, because you can't usually just say what those things are. And when you're meeting a character, you're trying to quickly give a sense of who they are, what they're dealing with. And that's kind of what's happening here. You're kind of setting up Carmi's whole, psychological and emotional journey in the show of where they're starting with all this kind of stuff, all this trauma that they have inside of him that he's trying to work through, that he wants to work through. Because you have the contrast of like how Carmi is being very sweet to this animal, but also like the rage and danger and anger of the animal. So it's a different approach to showing what's going on in Carmi and, what his journey is going to be. But also let's just look at the details, right? Carmi the bear, Berzado, 25 years old. Again, we're getting the age. The name is capitalized. Strung out, apron around his waist. So the only physical details we get is strung out, apron around his waist. And that's just goes to his identity, right? He is apron around his waist. He's in the kitchen. That's the place where he belongs. That's kind of at his core. And strung out. If you've seen the show, you can just picture his eyes and his face. It's so vivid. And that's just kind of where he is. Even the fact that he's fallen asleep at work is showing that he's exhausted, that he's overwhelmed. He's kind of already at a breaking point. And that's kind of fascinating that we're starting him already at a breaking point. So we're like, oh my goodness, what's he going to do? If this is where he is and there's going to be more problems coming, how's he going to deal with them? It's a very tantalizing opening. Finally, I want to look at the introduction of Paul Giamatti's character, Paul Hunnam, in David Hemingson's The Holdovers. Fun fact, David Hemingson was actually one of my first bosses when I was a PA, and I absolutely love this script that he wrote. So we are interior faculty residence, Paul's room, day, a narrow room, blue with smoke and crowded with books, classical music on the radio. Out the window, snow continues to fall. Paul Hunnam, a heap of rumpled corduroy, grades exams at his desk, pipe wedged between his teeth. Philistines, lazy, vulgar, rancid little Philistines. Exhausted by the mediocrity, Paul drops his pencil and lights his pipe. As he glances at a whiskey bottle, we see that one eye veers dramatically to the left. I love this character introduction because it is so evocative and gives the vibe of this character without that much physical detail. Like, the only two details we get are a heap of rumpled corduroy, which actually doesn't say anything about what he looks like, but just kind of tells us exactly who he is. You can picture him, right? The corduroy, the professorial, but like rumpled and again, kind of disheveled and like not a happy man, not in a good place, not really fitting into this world. And then also the lazy eye, which is just like such a specific character detail. And one good rule for character details is that if it's something unusual, mention it. If it's something that like sets this character apart from most of the other people in the world, and that's going to affect how the other characters in the world look at him or interact with them, then that's a good detail, like this eye. This is also a great example of using dialogue to encapsulate a character. One of my other old bosses, Jim Gavin, who created Lodge 49, which is the show that I wrote for, loved to sum up a character, like who they are, what their deal is, by their first line of dialogue. And here, when Paul says Philistines, lazy, vulgar, rancid little Philistines, we're just getting who he is. We're getting the fact that he is like at war with this world. He hates his students. They are an affront to him and everything he stands for. Even the formal language of Philistines, that he has this sort of professorial classical air to him. There's also other great details. The fact that he glances at his whiskey bottle. We see, okay, he's having these problems, he's at war, and he's using alcohol to self-medicate. So even just by that one little glance, we see, okay, this guy struggles with alcoholism. It's so clear from such a small detail. And again, in this example, we're setting him up on his character journey because here he is angry and alone, hating his students, hating the world, and that's where we meet him. But over the course of the movie, he is going to find something more than this. Instead of being alone, he's going to find connection. Instead of hating his students, he's going to find that he connects with one of them. At the start here, the world is something that doesn't bring joy, right? It's something to endure. It's something that he has to use alcohol to get through. But by the end, he's actually going to be able to find some joy in the world and replace this anger and bitterness with, something more positive and some redemption. So what are the takeaways? What lessons can we learn from these examples to use in our own scripts? Let's start with the basics. The first time the character appears in your script, write their name in all caps. That makes it very clear to the reader that a new character is being introduced. So they don't have to be like, wait, have we met this person before? Then you can share their age, either a specific age like 26 or a range like early 30s or elderly or something like that. Share their gender, either explicitly by saying, male, female, a woman, a man, etc., or by using pronouns like he, she. You can do it in action, like you can say, Micah Cratty, he talks to the camera. You can also give physical description of your characters, but be intentional with the description you give. In some of these examples, we saw that there was actually no physical description or very limited. And in the examples where there was physical description, it was relevant to their character and to the story and the journey they were starting on. It wasn't just kind of random details about what they look like. In the character description, it's also more important that you get the vibe of the character, who they are, what their deal is, what their problem is, than what they specifically look like. The physical details that are important are the ones that set them apart or have something to do with how they're perceived by the world or how they're going to go through the world. When we first meet them, instead of just telling the reader who they are, you can show who they are through their actions. It's often a great idea to have them solving some kind of problem. Specifically, what that problem is kind of shows what's going on in their life at the moment, and how they deal with that problem shows who they are at that moment. We want to see who they are now because we're starting them out on a journey, and you can forecast a little bit what that journey is going to be by showing what problems they're dealing with now. It shows us what problem they're going to have to overcome or what lesson they're going to learn over the course of your story. Finally, make the character intro fun to read. You are not writing a character bio, you're telling a story, and stories are engaging. You want to write it in such a way that the reader is excited to see where this character's story goes, because you don't want them to read the first page of your script, you want them to read to the last page. All right, that's it from me. If you're looking for a screenwriting app to write some character intros of your own, check out Arc Studio. You can find a link in the description to start writing your script for free. From all of us at Arc Studio, be kind to yourselves and happy writing.